Hello and welcome to the Renaissance History Podcast. This is a podcast brought to you by the digital Ren Faire that brings to life the history of Renaissance festivals through interviews with vendors, participants, and performers who have participated in, God, I just got off the rails. Do this again. Hello and welcome to the Renaissance History Podcast presented to you by the digital Ren Faire. This is a podcast bringing to life the history of Renaissance festivals through interviews with performers and vendors and other participants. I am your host, Jonathan Crocker, and joining me today is nationally touring comedian and songwriter, David Dixon. Hello, David.
Hello, Jonathan. Thank you so much for having me on board. This is fun.
I'm glad we're getting this chance.
Telling stories about the road is one of my favorite things to do.
Well, excellent. We'll give you lots of chances here. So why don't we start at the beginning, so to speak, or at least the beginning of your connection with festivals. Or if you want to go back a little bit further, what's your
my background? I started singing Gilbert and Sullivan operettas when I was 11 because they didn't have enough tenors. I did theater all through it. I toured with the last touring tent show in America, so I've actually trained as a true vaudevillian, and that's kind of neat. I'm old.
And what was that?
The Rozier Players was the last tent show in America that stayed on the road from 1898 until about 1992. We went for 100 years. It didn't quite get there. But it was a true tent show theater that would pull into town, put up a giant tent. We do 5 shows a week from Tuesday through Saturday night. And then we'd tear down on Sunday and move to a new town.
Wow.
It was an experience that I couldn't have paid for, and I got college credit for it. So
it was win-win.
Jackson Community College, my hometown, was the hometown of the man who owned the Rozier Players. And in his retirement, he donated it to the college. So I ended up being picked up as a guitarist. They needed a country western guitarist, and I got picked up to do that. But I did not know joining that kind of a show meant you do everything. And I did everything. I learned how to tap dance in 8 weeks.
All right.
So, you learned everything in that. So I toured with them, like I said, for 2 seasons, did a lot of theater around Detroit, raised a family, wrote music, did all those things, and met a friend of mine named Maggie Heineman up in Michigan. And this was just when the Michigan Festival was starting.
Which was when?
Maggie got an idea to do a feast. That we would do a royal feast. Nobody was doing this, anybody, anywhere. And we've charged at least $100 a plate back then for a 7-course, all alcohol free, complete with wenches and troubadours and jugglers and everything we needed to do a royal feast for people. And we sold it to companies in Detroit that wanted to do a special Christmas party for their people or something like that. And that was my first exposure to anything Renaissance-y. I showed up because I play the guitar. I brought my recorder just because I knew I played one. I didn't know if they wanted it. And I spent the next 3 years like sitting in the corner playing recorder. My wife was a wench and I was a troubadour. It was a really fun company. Made good Christmas money for a number of years doing that. And then the founder of the company, Margaret's husband, Michael, got cancer. And we lost Michael, and the company went aside. But at that same time was when Ren Faire was just taking off. I mean, it was probably the mid 80s, and the Michigan Ren Faire had taken off. And so my children, of course, had been very excited about this. They'd gone to the feasts as a child. They wanted to see what a festival was like. So we did visit the Michigan Festival a couple of times, and then we visited a little place called Silverleaf. And I speak fondly of that little tiny fair because we did so many things there. We went to visit because we heard they had cheap swords and funny entertainment. So the 2 main reasons to go were cheap swords and funny entertainment. And we found this delightful little festival in a public park, and it was lots of fun. The next season, I decided there had to be a way to get in for free. I mean, I'm sure there is, and everything. I thought we can volunteer for the parking lot and probably get a half a day free at the fair. So 2 of my children and I went and tried to look it up. Now, this was by then, it had to be the 90s. Yeah, I'm sure it was in the 90s by then. We were looking it up online and they had no volunteer page. So you couldn't find a way to volunteer, but they did have an auditions site. So
Hmm.
we showed up at auditions, the three of us, and basically said, well, if they don't take us, no big deal. We just want to work in the parking lot anyway. And my daughter went in first and she sang for them. And I went in and did my troubadour bit that I'd done before. And my son went in and sold the committee air, air in a box, and they were ready to buy it. And as he walked out the building, we all were heading to the car. They chased us to the car and said, "Are there more of you? Could you find more of you?" And my daughter looked at it and said, "Well, yeah, my brothers are pretty young yet, and my mom's just a costumer. She doesn't act at all." And these people lit up like a Christmas tree. They were like, "You have a costumer? You guys are like a dream come true for a little tiny Renaissance fair."
Right.
And it was delightful. Like I said, it was a delightful group of people. Really fun festival to work, and we did move the site. The following year, we had to move the site to a new park to build things, and that was in itself part of my street talk. Is to hand out little beads that I call beads of faith, and that I've seen a little tiny bead of faith take a bunch of people who believed in a fair and they took down an old dilapidated park that had 3 layers of deadfall and poisonous plants and turned it into a masterful play place for little children. And that's how I describe Silverleaf. Everybody there was committed to a level that just wasn't right. When you get to that level, and by the time we were done, I mean the Tortugas had played there. Oh my goodness, Bob. Who else had played there? Dead Bob had played there. I mean, we'd actually had some pretty big, decent national touring acts. Rick Rock played there all the time, and I got to develop my character there a little bit as a street character as a friar. I hadn't developed Friar Finnigan yet, but
I see.
that all happened when I got down to Georgia. Let me take a sip of my coffee and we'll just keep going.
All right. Well, I just have one question first, just to
Mhm.
fill in a piece of information. So where was this festival you were just talking about? Silver Lake,
Battle Creek, Michigan. It was
Battle Creek.
yep, it was between Battle Creek and Kalamazoo. And it was, like I said, just very interesting. West Michigan has a real hunger for Renaissance fairs. They just have never gotten a big one, and they've never had a permanent site.
Hmm.
That's really what they're doing. In fact, I'm doing McDudley's event, which is based on helping people who are blind or disabled to enjoy fairs better. I'm doing that
Oh,
one in Kalamazoo in June. So I still go up there. I still play with those folks.
so tell me what's involved with that?
McDudley's was started by a friend of mine named Bridget Ackley. She is an amazing woman who has cerebral palsy. She's almost totally blind. Um, and she has autism. But through her love of Ren Fairs, she decided she and her husband were going to put on their own festival. And that she was going
Uh-huh.
to make it a place where people could enjoy festival even if they can't see, even if they can't hear, whatever it is. She wants to make an awareness situation so that everybody wants to come will enjoy the day.
Wow.
It's amazing. I don't know how she does it between her and her husband. Her husband, Alan, is 72 and they're still hauling stages, putting just like the old days. I mean, just building a site out of nothing. And they're very, very nice to me, very kind to me. And I'm kind of helping them organize some things up there for them. And like I told her, it's amazing. She's done a miracle. She was told 5 years ago she'd never pull this off, and now she's on her third year. Uh,
That's wonderful.
It is. It is. It's really kind
Yeah.
of neat to see that. But that happens when you've got people who are passionate enough to decide that this magic has to happen. Yeah, if you get a chance online, go look up McDudley's Games, and they are all set up for visually impaired and folks who can come play games at Ren Fair. It's fun. Yeah, like I said,
Oh,
fun
cool.
place. So I moved to Georgia because of the economic downturn. We
Hmm.
lost everything in Michigan. I mean, we lost everything. And I got a job teaching in a rural Georgia district. So I took it, and my entire family moved south too because they couldn't find work in Michigan either. So we all
Mhm.
moved to Georgia, and it wasn't long before we went to the Georgia Renaissance Festival.
Sure.
And we visited and we had a good time. And I was teaching theater at the time in Haralson County. And I had some students who auditioned for cast. And I had told them, I said, I think you're too young, but I mean, you want to audition, it's just another audition. Just go to as many as you want. And they both got cast. And so what year was that? 2000, when was that?
Wait a minute, it had to be 2009.
2009.
8 and 9.
2009 was when we got to Georgia. Um, then my daughter, well, actually, who did audition first? Well, I think I did. Oh, that's right. Didn't I audition for Georgia first? We had visited for like 2 or 3 years, and then when I left teaching, and I say that lightly, we can go into that in another podcast. Uh, when I left teaching, I wasn't doing anything really. I didn't have any work. And my daughter was the one who said, well, auditions are coming up for that Renaissance Fair, so you could put an act together and just send it out on the road. And I said, I don't know if I'm going to get paid for telling silly jokes and singing my own songs. And she said, well, you always told your students to just try. But I guess if it didn't count for you, then why'd we even say it?
Oh.
And two of my former students' future daughters-in-law, by the way, are in the living room doing this. Yeah, Dad, what are you going to do? So I put an act together with my daughter and my son. We were going to audition as a trio. I thought that'd be fun. And they both backed out on me at the last minute. So I went to Val.
Well, that's because he went to Afghanistan.
Yeah, because he went to Afghanistan. He really couldn't avoid that. He had to go to Afghanistan. So I auditioned it as a solo act, and I told Val when she gave it to me, I'll do this for a couple of weeks. If it doesn't seem like it's working, I'll go back to the street. I mean, I'll just play. I know how to do that. I mean, I'd been Friar Finnigan on the street for 3 years by that point, 4 years by that point, and went up and started doing the show. The second week I was doing the show at the Georgia Renaissance Festival, I met the crew from Ohio. Cheryl Buckholtz came up behind me. I didn't even know she was there. Turned around, and here's this beautiful little woman who's saying to me, I'm from the Ohio Renaissance Festival, and we want you. And I was in shock. I thought, I can't go to my daughter and tell her that not only is it going well, but I just got picked up by another fair. I'll never hear the end of this from my daughter. You don't know what she's like. Sure enough, to this day, I'm still being chided about all of that. So that was how I got picked up by the Ohio Fair and started traveling up the I-75 corridor, doing that little loop of entertaining down there.
Oh, ye of little faith.
None whatsoever. And it's not like I hadn't been performing my whole life. I knew what to do when I built the act. I went to talk to
Really?
I talked to Adrian from Tartanic. I talked to the Tortuga Twins. I talked to a couple other acts I knew and said, what are the basics? What do you think you have to have for a Ren Faire show? You got to have a catchphrase, preferably something they can take home. If you've got tunes, they ought to be very catchy and make sure people can remember them easy. And so I built the show using all the stuff that I learned over the years to make what I thought would be a successful Ren Faire show. And it seems to be pretty successful. So I'm pretty happy with it. Frank?
Great.
My dog is snoring. I hope you're not picking that up. Oh, now she stops. That was. Oh, so yeah, we like I said, I hit Georgia, and I played Friar Finnigan on the street, and then that was when I first started having discussions about Ren Faire history with people, because I was actually taking stuff up to the office quite a bit and getting to talk to Ellie and Jack and those guys. Which is a really interesting thing to do if you've never had a chance to talk to owners of a Ren Faire, because you get good stories.
So now we're talking about Georgia. So Jack
Yeah,
Sias is who you're
Jack
referring
Sias
to?
is what I'm talking about. I'm sorry, and his first wife Ellie. They
Mm-hmm.
owned the show when I got there. They were going through the midst of a divorce, and looking back at it, I can see where a lot of the pressure came from that. I mean, but basically, yeah. When I found Ellie doing laundry, I mean, she was washing all the smock tops from all the band kids that come and volunteer and all the food thing. I said, excuse me, ma'am, but don't you own the festival? And she said, oh, yeah, big time owner here. I do laundry 3 days a week. I'm on the grounds 4 days a week. I'm doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it
Yep.
really set a tone with me. It was like even the owners of this place are doing far more than they should, just to make the place keep going. So that was when, like I said, I started talking to Ellie and talking to Jack. But before we even get to that, I'm going to have to tell you more about the Ohio Renaissance Festival. So if you don't mind, I'm
All
going to
right.
take
We'll take a road trip up to Ohio.
we'll come to Ohio. I'm going to take you on a little trip because after I did the Ohio Renaissance Festival for 2 years, I got a message from a guy named Dustin Stevens at a little festival in Texas called Four Winds.
I've heard of it.
Four Winds became it was like the fair nobody ever did. He was there for 20 years and never had more than 300 patrons in any one day. He just kept this place running because he wanted to keep it running. And while I was out there every morning, because there was not a whole lot to do, there was a coffee shop on the grounds that had been built by one of the volunteers out there. And every morning he'd come out and make coffee. So I would wander over there to get my coffee and to smoke my pipe and to talk to the other guys with gray beards because we realized we had a gray beard circle of men who were all just avoiding going to work is what we were really doing. And we had a rule: you couldn't bring up religion and you couldn't bring up politics. But if you had a way to fix the world, we'll sit here and listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the only two. And mostly it was talking about stuff we'd fixed, talking about stuff we'd been exposed to having to do, learning carpentry when you don't want to learn carpentry. And one of the men I met in that Graybird circle, his name was Bob, but his dog's name was Jack. And I remember this specifically because he used to talk to that dog more than he talked to us. He was one of those guys that talked to his dog all day long. And he was building the new castle front that Dustin was putting in at Four Winds. And I had asked him, I said, this is pretty amazing. Let me go watch you build this castle front because I thought it was pretty cool. Whatever type of plaster or whatever he was doing to make it look that way. And he said, it's the same technique we used at Ohio. And I said, you built the front gate at Ohio? He said, well, most of it until I tried to kill Peter. But other than that, I beg your pardon. He said, I tried to shoot that bastard one day. He said, they wouldn't let me. They dragged me off site before I could do it. But I swear to God, I was going in to shoot him. This is where the stories start to get interesting.
Yeah, this is a good one. I don't think I've heard that one.
Nope. He was told when he came in that Peter wanted to build Roman roads in his one main circle road so that road would be there forever. Until Bob went to him with the cost estimate of how much it was going to cost to put in a true Roman road. Bob had already started digging the trenches. He had already started getting the stones lined up to start to do it. He had started doing the job when Peter came in and told him, rip all that stuff out. That cost too damn much. We're taking those rocks back. We're just going to lay down crushed concrete. This drove Bob crazy. And he was not that kind of a guy. And as he said, that was just step number one. And then from then on, it became nothing they built was cheap enough for Peter. That's really what it came down to. No matter what price they came up with for what they were building, it wasn't cheap enough for Peter. He wanted to save even more money on it. Now, as I recall, that was during the time when Peter and Jack still owned both festivals together. They owned Georgia and Ohio together at the same time for a while.
It's very brief. Yeah.
After they sold Maryland. Now, as like I said, I'm trying to remember all these stories that I've heard. But after they sold Maryland, they bought the properties for Georgia and for Ohio on the same basic plan, which was buy a property that's going to get developed eventually. Buy a property they're going to want to put houses on eventually. And that way, if this thing tanks, we're just going to sell it for the property.
Right.
Jack told me they made more money their first year at Maryland than they ever would have expected to make. He said it was a far more successful business model than they thought it was going to be. And I can't tell you what year that was when they first started this. But like he said, it was. Have you ever seen the videos from the California Pleasure Fair in the first couple of years? really old. They were just tents. It looked like an SCA event that was a little glorified. That's pretty much what he said Maryland looked like at that point too. They didn't have any buildings up. They just had the land. They brought in tents. They put down a joust field, and they have a giant staircase there at Maryland now. I guess this is what I've been told, where they used to put kids in a wagon, and for $1, they'd get pushed down the hill into a bunch of hay bales at the bottom of the hill.
We'll have to research that one. I haven't heard that one.
Oh my God! I heard this one from Jack himself. He
Really?
said we hired a kid. He said the kids themselves would push the wagons back up the hill for us. They loved doing it. And it was another $1, and you'd get in and go back down. He says, "Man, the liability just to even think about the liability of something like that now." He says, I can't imagine that we did that. And there is something else on that hill now. I can't remember whether it's a staircase or I don't think it's a slide.
I think they have built stairs. Yeah,
I think it's a staircase, and he said that was just something that they never expected they'd make money off of, but they never got sued for it either. He like I said, they own Maryland, and then they bought the properties for Ohio and Georgia, and it's my understanding that at some point in the partnership, they broke up the partnership, and Peter took Ohio and Jack took Georgia. Now that could have been before they had to move the Georgia site, because I know that was a bit of a disaster on the part of that company. They were forced out of the site that they had in Douglasville, and they moved across the street. Which I don't know a whole lot about the old site because that's not my deal. Steve Wright, he'd know a lot about that. We've got guys in Georgia that have been there 25, 30 years, so they know all of that. But they did it one time. Yeah, they moved the entire site across the freeway at Georgia. Broke down the buildings board by board, carried them across the street, and put them back together. Which I can't imagine. Can't imagine doing that. But then, we moved the Silverleaf site, and I didn't think of it as the same thing. So same sort of thing, I guess. Anyway, the other thing, what was I going to tell you? Oh, about why did he want to shoot Peter?
Right.
The day, let me get back to that point. Yes, exactly. The day he was told that the front, that he didn't like something about the front of the entrance, the big entrance, castle entrance there, that he wasn't pleased with it at all. And they had been working on it coming up to, it must have been first year festival. I think he said the first year was behind him, so he was working on something else. But he had been there with Peter for over a year, working maintenance and building things. And then he said one day Peter had sent a note through somebody else to tell him that the work he did was not good enough, and he wanted him to redo it. And he said, I just grabbed my revolver out of the tent and started walking towards the office. I thought, oh my God. Obviously, you didn't shoot him. He went, no. They grabbed me before I could get there, took the gun away from me, made me go take a 3-day vacation where you wear the funny socks. Oh my God! And this guy was like,
there's no stress in our industry ever, right?
Stress. No, there's no stress in our industry whatsoever. And yet here he was, still building another castle front down in Florida, in Texas, for a fair that unfortunately closed that year. That was the last year Four Winds was there. I don't want to become the act that was there the last year every fair closes. That's not a really good thing to be known as.
Not a good look.
No, it's not. No. It's not. Like I said, what I found out about most fair owners is that they do have a lot of property and they do want to make some money with it, but they don't want to work really, really hard. And that may sound, they don't want to put an industry on it. They don't want to build a business that they're going to have a factory and a production facility or something like that. They're looking for another way to make money on their property. And they put up a festival site. And at Ohio, where they're doing the Celtic Festival and all the music festivals and that, I think that's the way to do it. Use that site as much as you can. Jack's model seems to be more that he started off with a fall fair and then with a spring fair, and then he did a spring fair and a fall fair for 8-9 years. They did both. Ran into trouble getting entertainers because the fall's really booked. So they couldn't get the entertainers, couldn't get the vendors they wanted. And now they do a haunted house. They just open the whole village to a haunt. But it's just, like I said, another way to use your property and make some money.
Right. Scarborough does that as well.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, I would think fruit trees, but I'm not really a businessman, am I? Say if I was a businessman, I'd probably own my own Ren Fair, but then my wife would leave me because that's the one thing that she said would cause her to leave me would be if I ever started my own Ren Fair. So I can't do that.
Okay. We're safe.
God, I hope so. Anyway, what else have I heard about old? Oh, Peter, my other favorite. Oh, God, there goes the whole camera. Sorry. My other favorite story about Peter is how he used to judge the parking lot with his fancy cars. Whether or not the parking lot was worthy of parking on a rainy day in Ohio, he judged by one of his expensive cars. And I don't know what kind of car it was. It looked like a Porsche or a Lamborghini or a sports car of some sort that
Well,
he
he
took
would
out.
lease a new car every couple of years. Sometimes it was
Right.
Mercedes. Sometimes it was, they were all top of the line for
I know of at
sedans.
least twice that he apparently took that car out in the parking lot, sunk it up to the axles, and said, "Okay, we're not opening," because he didn't want to have to tow 500 cars out of that parking lot. And
Well,
boy,
there's leading by doing, right?
right. And when they get rain, Ohio gets rain.
Yeah, it does.
That place floods out, but you know that.
I've seen the
So what
water
else do you
flow.
want to know? Let me see. What other stories do I have? Gosh.
Well, I'm a little thin on Georgia history, so I would love to hear more about what you know about Georgia.
Oh, sure. Sure. Absolutely. Let me get that
So
adjusted a
Jack
little bit.
Hayek founded that fair.
Is it well with yeah, you haven't played that fair, have you?
No, I never
Georgia,
had.
yeah. Georgia's about the same size well, okay, it's smaller than Ohio. It's you can see the same design ideas all over it. And from what I've seen, they have a very loyal set of not only people that come out, but people who volunteer, people who work there. They had a queen that was there for 20 years. They've had this queen for 12. And people just don't tend to leave, so they're doing something right. It makes people want to come back. And when I first started, like I said, started doing my show, they had three main taverns. They still have three main taverns where the entertainment happens. And there's the front. Yeah, I was stuck at the back tavern my very first year, at the very back tavern, and within a couple of years, we started bringing more entertainment back there. So it started to look like we needed to expand things. Well, instead of expanding with more stages, they just bought more bars, put in more alcohol, so there's lower lines. And that does help the grease the wheels of the day, that's for sure, and keep people moving. But when they let me go back to the move, because from what I heard, that when they moved, the idea was to take the buildings that were set up for stunt show. That they had two stages that they had built for stunt show on the original site that they moved over to the new site where we are now. Which is why we still have sliding poles down the back of stages and why we still have secret staircases places that nobody knows about. And you got to go back a long ways to find any even video of that sort of entertainment. But Georgia was known for its steel fighting and for its scenarios for many, many years. Jack likes that sort of stuff. What he likes to see is, entertainment on the street where people are being entertained all the time. And they did the Robin Hood scenario. They did the King John scenario. They did pretty much all the classic scenarios at one time or another. And with live steel fighting like in the streets. So, like I said, it's pretty cool when when a sword fight breaks out within 5 feet of you and you're in the streets at a Ren Fair. They enjoy that stuff.
Yeah, I
And
haven't seen that in a long time.
I haven't either. I haven't. I mean,
Yeah.
well, it's been 4 years at Georgia. We haven't done it in 4 years at Georgia. My daughter was part of that fight team, and that was one of her favorite things to do was go sword fight. And now we're moving away from that more into a fantasy fair kind of an idea, and not nearly as much violence as we used to have. But they did bring in the steel fighters this year, so we're having steel fighters this weekend beat each other up in their tin cans and see how long they can take it. Uh,
Okay.
but
But
the
you were
other
talking about the
thing
move.
about the move, right? Exactly. So apparently they put out the word that they had to move the fair, and they had hundreds of people show up to help. I mean, they had people who showed up just to pull nails, just to put things on boards, to pack them onto trailers and take them over to the new site and put it back together. And that gelled. I mean, that gelled that group of people for years, so that they still talk about the old site, but they
Mhm.
love the new site too. It's
And
bigger.
what
It
was,
gave them, sorry. Yeah,
I was
well, it
just
just gives
curious
them
what
more
the
room to
reason.
expand. They're kind
Okay.
of landlocked. You can't really go anywhere in Georgia because we've got neighborhoods almost surrounding the fair right now. So there's nowhere to buy land to move to get bigger. They're
Mhm.
kind of landlocked. And the idea was, I think back then, they're never going to need that much land. They'll never need that much land. I mean, that's ridiculous. And here they've been carving out more parking by the week, trying to get us enough space for people. So, um, I think I think a lot of people from 25 years ago would be shocked to see what Ren Fair has become and how it's grown, and what it is around the country, but not just even little fairs like Kentucky. You've got a permanent bathhouse that's just not to be beat. So I mean, it's like every fair I go to, no matter what size they are, seems to have put in things that particular owner thought was important. And I always appreciate that because, like I said, at Kentucky, you've got a shower house that's just amazing.
Mhm.
At Georgia, you've got trees. At Florida, you've got these wonderful open. It's just every fair you go to, somebody's going to build something that they think is important. So I look for that. Like the owners in Ohio put in that wonderful riverscape where the tri bridge is. When they
Mhm.
filled all that with stone, I thought that raised the value of that place by $1 million to me. Just made it look so much better. Um, and like I said, you kind of look to see, and I take that as who the owners are, and of course I kind of know the new owners at Ohio too. If we're going to tell stories about that, we're going to have to tell stories about the Naughty Bawdy Pub Show, and I don't know where this podcast goes.
Well, let's see what we have time for.
Oh, because that's the new owners at Ohio, not that dirty
Mhm.
thing. No, we wouldn't ever do anything really dirty on. No, like I said, I wouldn't do anything on there dirty. It is a funny thing to see though, because when we did bring in the Naughty Buddy Pub Show, um, at Ohio, it was a secret. It was a little secret show. It was backed by your stage, a
Right.
little tiny secret show, and nobody knew about it. And then when the new owners came in, I had Chuck come up to me, and he's because I had sung one of my songs that I thought was fairly naughty, and he said, "Do you have anything worse?" And I said, "Well, no, but I write my own stuff. Just tell me where the line is." And he said, "Oh, there is no line here. You can just write whatever you want to write. That'd be just fine." And it's been happy days ever since there. So, uh, so yeah,
Yeah.
opportunism. Yeah, like I said earlier, Jack and Peter pushing kids down the hill in a wagon, just looking for another way to figure out how to use this land and make more money. That's essentially the history of Ren Fair that I've seen.
It,
Um,
it's
and,
one
and
of the currents every podcast I've done so far. There's this current of people, the play space inviting people to experiment and let the audience tell you
right,
what they want,
right, right, exactly.
and
Yep,
that
exactly.
that feedback, that back and forth with the audience, is one of the treats we have because with a seasonal audience, you have that chance to like hear what works, let people tell you what they want, and then you
Right,
have time to go back and say, okay, more of that, less of that, or even week to week. You have the
right,
time, the five
right.
days
No,
between weekends.
right.
It's like, oh, I better adjust my show a little bit because it's not working so well here, or this thing I just tried is working, and so there's this coevolution of the
There
performance
is.
style.
And it feels different. The audience feels different. They feel more familiar. They don't feel. I don't feel like they're not intruding. It's just that for instance, About every 4 weeks, I try to do a Sunday night show where there's normally not very many people at my Sunday afternoon show. It's close to the last joust. It's tired. It's hot. We average about
Hmm.
88 degrees at Georgia. And so I started doing what I call the notebook show, where I just go through my bad joke comedy notebook, and kind of judge with the crowd how well these work. How well are these work?
A live workshop.
It's a live workshop, right? And with a live audience. It's like, but they seem to be,
Yeah.
they like it. I mean, they like it. I like it. And like you said, it's a different kind of feel with an audience at a Ren Fair. You feel like you can talk to them.
Yeah. Yes.
The knights at the joust at Georgia ride their horses in front of the crowd for a good 20 minutes before anything starts. They just get them out there in front of the crowd to warm them up.
Hmm.
But they're also really good conversationalists. Um, they're actors on horseback, and they spend 20 minutes chatting with the crowd, about the horse, about horseback riding, about whatever it is. And it really changes the feeling of the show,
No
um,
doubt.
because now that knight. I mean, you actually
Right.
spoke to him. You're going to be heartbroken when he dies. Uh, but like you said, for some reason, the Ren Fair audience feels like that. Like, and I don't think I've ever. Well, I can't say that. I rarely have had anybody critique me, really, truly critique me, at a Ren Fair. Most of them are just like, "Oh, you didn't do my favorite song," or "Aren't you doing that joke anymore?" Or they give you a chance to look at the old stuff and bring back the old jokes, because sometimes those work better.
Things come back around.
They do. They do. And yeah, especially in a show like mine. Now, yeah, you've never seen my show. I do I do bad jokes. I do dad jokes essentially. I just tell strings of bad jokes, and then I sing funny songs in between where I do my own songs. It works really well in a pub setting because you can
Hmm.
hold the crowd for about 2 or 3 minutes and then do a song. And they'll either listen or they won't. But for the most part, they listen. Especially if you've got to sing along, you've got something else you can get them involved
Right.
in.
Right.
Um, and I do, and I do. I include all that stuff in my show too. So I also have a game that we play, that is a very unique uh, game. I wrote a song called the
Yeah.
Fine. I wrote a song called the Fine Spanish Lady, and in that song, there's a line where the troubadour says to his lady love, "Oh, lady, high on your balcony, would you cast your brown eyes at my form?" And friends of mine from Ohio made brown eyeballs out of crochet with trailing optic nerve so they could throw them at me during a show, which was hysterical. So now I have a prop box I use anyway. So now the game that they have is when I sing form, I let people throw eyeballs to see if they can get it into the box and therefore win a little tiny flogger that I hand out. Just, I don't even have one with me. A little tiny flogger that I give people as a prize to remember their day with Friar Finnigan. Um, in my mind, like I said, I wanted to set up something unique. I wanted to set
Hmm.
up something nobody else is doing. And to follow that whole thing, I'm an opportunist. I mean, I have had people turn down those little tiny floggers because they were determined to win one. That's the fun part for me. I had a man who stood up in my show last 2 weeks ago and yelled, 3 years, 3 years I've been trying to win one of those tiny little floggers, and I finally got one.
Hallelujah.
It was great. It was great. Oh, geez, I
Hey,
got off track of the
well,
history. We're talking more of my history now, aren't we?
yeah. Well, that's important too.
It's Let me go back on myself here for just a minute too. I do play guitar, and I
Right.
learned to play guitar with a folk group that was fashioned after the New Christie Minstrels. I don't know if you remember those guys.
Hmm.
Big folk band. They'd have like 4 or 5 guitars and a couple of drums and a flute. And we would walk into a room with like 20 different kids, all dressed in red and white gingham to sing "This Land Is Your Land," and good patriotic stuff and uplifting stuff, and and when I joined that group, let's say I was I was their tambourine player my first year. The second year, a bunch of the guitar players left to go to college, and they said, "We'll need a new guitarist." So I said, "Oh, I'll ask around school to see if I know any." And they said, "No, you're it. Just get a guitar."
Okay.
And you have a lot of faith in my learning how to play guitar. They said, "Yep, we do." And that was it. After that, I was sitting in a circle of hippies, playing love, peace, and understanding songs as a rehearsal, and then we'd go out to nursing homes or schools or gatherings or Rotary lunches or wherever we'd go and sing and play for all those people. So I had that experience too, long before I got to the Renaissance Fair. I was already being shoved in front of crowds of people whom I didn't know at all, and being told, smile, smile, sing out, just look like you know what you're doing. Nobody cares. When you get those lessons early in life, I think it does aim you towards a different situation than
It does.
And this
It does.
is my retirement job. So this has not been my career. This is my retirement job. So I spent 32 years in education, and the schools were good to me because they stayed with the schools for a long time. And like I said, but now to be able to do what I do, and then pick up fun stories about people from Ren Fairs, and try and pick up some histories. Yeah, I'd like to hear more about the out west fairs, but I haven't ever toured out west, so I have no idea what they're like. Just that little I-75 corridor, and about a dozen little tiny festivals that nobody's ever heard of.
Well, in some ways, that's really fortunate to be able to have a nice, compact, tour.
It kind of
Is
is.
a real
It kind of
blessing.
is. Well, it helps when my old home is up in Michigan and new home's in Georgia, so we don't mind
Right.
making
So
that
you have
trip back and forth. Michigan's got lots of things that I like. I just don't like winter. And yet I'll do their Viking festival in February. They've got a mead and fire festival in February that's indoor tents and heated, and that's always fun to hang around with Viking. And to move on to those little tiny fairs for just a minute.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, the little tiny fairs that I've done, like McDudley's. Okay, McDudley's is
Yeah.
never going to hit. I don't even think. And Michiana, which I love Michiana, and it's in Indiana, and they just moved to a county fairgrounds, which they
Mhm.
didn't want to do for a long time, but they tripled their gate. I mean, they tripled their gate when they did that. They didn't know what to
So what
do.
does that mean? Triple from what to what?
Tripled from about 1,500 to almost 6,000.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, just
Yeah.
that was more than that. For about 45 hours, because it was 4,500, I think is what he said last year. 4,500. And it was for a volunteer organization that is there as a historical organization. That's who sponsors that one. It was big, and they needed a year like that because keeping those little fairs going, you're barely ahead of yourself, especially the
And is
ones
this
that can't sell alcohol.
this
Because
is one
alcohol free.
weekend show or?
That's a one weekend show in Indiana in August called Michiana. And they bring in some great entertainers too. It's a really fun show. I just did Florida Gulf Coast. Oh gosh, I got to get all this right. Florida Gulf Coast Renaissance Festival, Wild West and Car Show.
Okay,
I
that's a large
I
wrapper.
I kid you not, and I recommend it to people. I mean, because as Andy Wolf said, her shop was set up right in front of a Wild West show. I mean, a complete shootout show, bang, bang, bad guys falling, the whole thing. She's in the middle of a Ren Fair day. This is delightful. And they had brought in the jousters from Full Metal Jousting. Shane and that crew from Full Metal Jousting was there. So
Mhm.
they were in a big arena doing their thing. But this was another festival set up on a fairgrounds that seemed to be doing really well. I don't know, like I said, I don't know how he mixed his metaphors on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like a Disney model where you have like, Frontier Town and
Yeah. You know
the
what? I
Fantasy
didn't think about
Kingdom
that.
and
It
then the
is.
car show. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So so I'll be doing that one again. I used to do a little one called Enchanted Lakes that was run by a local group of people in Indiana, northern Indiana. They lasted 5, 6 years. Never really got great crowds, but had a good. They always paid me my full wage. I always remind everybody of that. They paid my full rate, and they were good to me and all the other entertainers. It was right on a lake, Jonathan. I mean, it was right on a lake. There was a constant breeze from that lake all day long on a hot August day. It was just a delightful place to play. But they opened the bar an hour before we opened the show. I'm not because the VFW ran the bar, so they could just
Okay.
open it whenever they wanted. And by the time I got to my show, they couldn't sing the callbacks. It was awful. There was Friar Fib. That's hard. And that, like I said, that was another one that was in a local county 4-H park.
Magical Realm.
Magical Realm is a festival up in Michigan that is a completely volunteer fair. They pick out a recipient from the Ren Faire circuit who could use some help every year, and everybody works for that person basically. And boy, did they help me out. They helped me out tremendously when I was fighting cancer. I was their honoree one year, and so I try to get up there every year so I could help somebody else. But when you're not there to make money, the pressure goes away in a way. I mean, when I make that decision that I'm going up there to make money for somebody else, I don't feel nearly as pressured about anything. I will walk right in front of the patrons and say, "Give me more money." No, I need more than that. We're raising money for a person here. Come on. That I don't mind at all. It's the whole hat pass thing after the show that I forget to do. Big part of the day, and you can't forget to do that.
Don't forget that part. No,
No,
really,
you really can't.
Yeah.
But let's see what other little ones. Like I said, oh, and there was a terrible. Oh God, should I say this one? There was a festival once called Black Rock, as in Bad Day at Black Rock. It was the group that tried to take over after Silverleaf. They tried to take a festival in West Michigan. They had a property, and they spent a ton of money the first year on entertainment. I mean, just a ton of money. And they built a new site and they invested all this money into it. And within less than a year, the entire group had fallen apart. This whole group of investors who had gone in on how they wanted to run this fair were at each other's throats as to how much money they had spent and why there wasn't any profit and why didn't they make any money their first year and how are we going to get our own. The whole group fell apart. But the fair stayed on for another 8 years. It was 8 years, run by one man who eventually consolidated it all under his name, and he kept the fair running.
Very bad mistake.
But it kept getting, boy, that's the word, cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. They weren't meeting my wage requirement. I was only going up there so I could go camping for free for 4 weeks in the Michigan woods. They weren't paying anybody the way they needed to. Everybody felt hinky about the place. It just started, feel weird. And the last year I was there, they made all the entertainers sign a waiver that we would take a percentage of the gate, but we had to trust them on how much the gate was. And I think my total check for 5 weeks was $350. I was livid. Absolutely livid. Yeah, and feeling kind of stupid because I knew they were going to screw me on something like that. I mean, it just sounds stupid, and I knew it was stupid going into it. But I kind of felt like I wanted to be there the last year they existed. So I did. But that was, to me, the look of bad management is what happened at Black Rock. Trying to manage by committee is never easy. You've got to have one guy, and one guy's got to be a jerk. He's the one who says no. He's the one who says you can't do it. He's the one who says, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. You got to have that one guy to do that. Yeah, I know. I don't want to hear that as a title either. David Dixon in the last year at fair. How many last fairs? Yeah,
They call him Fair Killer.
Yeah, really. I beg you to understand. Most of these are very small fairs, and they really weren't very well run. And like I said, many festivals back in the day, especially the little tiny ones, had no security on their gate. They didn't have anybody watching over the money counters, and they lost money every time. And now that you've got cameras on all of your money counters, now that you've got somebody watching all that money, I suppose you could be better off with the gate money. But at a place like Black Rock, there was no security at all,
Hmm.
really. We didn't have a cop on site. I know that. And so there was no security on the gate. No wonder you didn't make any money. Somebody's slipping 20s into their pocket all day long. And I assume that's what happened at a couple of those festivals that, people just felt, and unfortunately, people sometimes feel like if I can't get what I need out of my employer, I will take what I need out of my employer. Meaning that people tend to double dip and take things they're not supposed to touch, and that's
I'm
because yeah, shocked. I know you're just
shocked.
absolutely shocked. Um, but that same management difficulty that I said, who's watching the front gate and who's going to be the asshole that has to say no. Okay, those are the two questions I have at pretty much every fair I go to. Because if you're not getting your gate money, you're not making any. And you need to know which one of these guys is the jerk that's gonna, be able to say no, and or and stop the craziness that is Ren Fair. Because, like you said, in an atmosphere like that where you're allowed to just flourish with ideas, I mean, your ideas, everything's okay. We can think of any idea at all. You get some pretty outrageous ideas. You get people who start thinking way outside of the budget, and then they don't understand why we can't do it. For instance, like I said, every fair I see spends a bunch of money on a joust field.
Hmm.
They do, and they only use it 3 times a day, and
Hmm.
that's where I get baffled by it. Like, I want to see it used more often. Almost every fair I see, like I said, has one main entry gate, and usually has the same people in that ticket booth all the time. It's the ones that worry me when they change the ticket booth people out. I'm thinking, who's really in charge of that money?
Hmm.
And it could just be because I ran a theater department for a high school. We watched every dime. I mean, everything we made was accounted for, and we made money. So I know you can make money if you have a free theater. That was what we did at the high school. And so when I see that, like I said, it happened at Black Rock, and I saw it at Enchanted Lakes.
But
Um,
I see you've got your management hat on when you're looking at that. I get
I
it.
do. I
Yeah.
really do, and I
Yeah.
don't mean to. I have associates in business. I mean, I went to school for it, so I could know what I'm looking at. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why I've never jumped into it. I don't want to go into debt to start a business. That's why I do what I do. I can write my songs for free. Uh, in fact, that's one of the reasons why I only do my own songs, was because I don't want to have to worry about copyright, or infringing on somebody else, or any of that stuff. By doing
Right.
all my own songs, it's my copyright, and I can do what I want to with it, and publish what I want. And you can't make me publish the ones I don't like.
Right. Yeah,
Uh,
that's another
it-
thread that is consistent throughout this podcast has been, the opportunity that Renaissance festivals offer to create your own work. I mean, it's
they
a
do.
really rare environment, that
That's
way.
what I love about it. And I do thank my audiences every day for that right there. Just giving me an audience I can play this stuff to. It's written specifically to Ren Fair audiences. Um, just to have a crowd that you can perform with. I mean, that makes me feel so good. And I don't get massive crowds at a pub show. I don't expect to. I mean, that's not what the pub show is really all about. What I want to do is just entertain my little section of people here. And as I tell the new kids all the time, never count how many people are there before the show. You want to know how many people are there after the show. That's the ones that count for a pub act. Because if you can hold
Hmm.
them, you're doing really good.
Right. Right.
So, like I said, I have quite a history of entertaining, and
Yeah.
like, started writing music at 16. Probably started writing music sooner than that. I just didn't know how to write it down until I was 16. And then I have published 5 different CDs. Right now, I have 5, and I'm working on a Christmas album because it's Renaissance-y stuff. So, we'll do that next. And like
Hmm.
you said, it's an opportunity, to be able to take this stuff. And my friend Larry Deering has an album he put out of his own recorder music that's just stunning. It's absolutely beautiful recorder stuff, but not too many people want to buy recorder music, unless you're into Renaissance fairs.
The market, yeah.
So the market is different there. So I like to mix all that up if I can, with the guitar and the recorder and put it on the recordings. I'm just not a big fan of being in the studio, if you can't tell.
You're doing fine. Good.
So, like I said,
no,
when
I think
you
that's
talk
true about live performers,
Yep.
You want to be out there putting your material in front of people. That's where it lives.
Yeah.
And especially with the sort of thing that as again we craft together with the audience, the call and response, the sensitivity to the feeling of the audience, the mood. That's hard to reproduce in a studio, or impossible in sometimes.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. It's impossible. So you have to kind of settle for something different than that, and understand that they still buy my product. That's the cool thing.
You still need the product. Yeah, absolutely.
And they, like I said, I'm selling my music on CDs now, or I'm sorry, on flash drives now. I got rid of the CDs, but the music's doing well because I got the idea from somebody named Victoria. Because she's pretty clever.
I know a couple of Victorias. I'm wondering which one you're thinking of.
This one that's on this one right here. Oh, I'm sorry. The Lady Victoria. That's who I mean. The Lady Victoria. But looking back at the stories I've heard, like I said, it's amazing to me if you'll just sit and listen to older Renaissance fair people who have been around for a long time, and just let them talk. just let them talk. You're going to hear stories like, I tried to kill Peter Carroll one day. And if you just get them to extrapolate on that, you're going to have yourself a really good story to tell.
So just what's your top three stories, or pick one in terms of amazing thing that happened.
That
you've got one. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, first of all, for the building of a Ren Fair, my favorite stories are they shoved him down a hill in a wagon. He wanted to build Roman roads. And apparently he didn't care if somebody tried to shoot him. It was that kind of a Wild West setup. It's hard to think of. And it was that kind of a Wild West setup. Those are my probably three favorite stories of the history of Ren Fair, from what I've heard from other things. That and the fact that if we're not all committed, we probably should be.
We should all be wearing socks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, what I was going to say, those special socks, we all feel better in those. It's and it's been fun because I'm gregarious and outgoing, and I don't mind asking people questions. And so I'm just happy to go up there and see what information I can get. And I'm glad to share it with you. This has been kind of fun.
It's been great, David. Thank you so much for all of your stories, and wishing you luck down the road.
Thank you so much.
Looking forward to seeing you in Ohio in the fall.
All right. We'll see you down the road then.
Down the road. My name is Jonathan Crocker, and I'm happy to be the host of the Ren Faire History Podcast presented by the Digital Ren Faire. Follow along on Facebook at facebook.com/Digital Ren Faire. You can find me at the Wyld Men on Facebook, or Theater on the Ground on Facebook, also wildman.com or moremud.com. And Dave, where can we find you?
At Friar Finnigan on almost every single place you can look. I'm Friar Finnigan on Google. So just Google me at Friar Finnigan and you'll find me at Facebook and Instagram and all TikTok and all that stuff.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you.